It's been 6 months since we began our investigation into the Cadence Theater. Our client Julia Adler discovered the remains of a Broadway actress who disappeared back in 1934. Her board of directors are threatening to pull the plug on the entire establishment, and the NYPD can't spare any manpower to focus on this very cold case. A part of me thinks that this whole thing is a setup, one elaborate internal sabotage. Or is there another explanation? Regardless, I will get to the bottom of this. After all, murder is murder, even if the body is covered in cobwebs.
Whether you prefer to work alone or as a group, Hunt a Killer will put your detective skills to the test. With each delivery, you'll sift through documents, evidence, audio recordings, and case files as you eliminate suspects and identify the murder weapon. And if you've exhausted all your leads, you can always turn to a community of over 100,000 fellow detectives to help crack the case. As a fan of the true crime genre myself, I give Hunt a Killer my personal stamp of approval. Right now, you can go to huntakiller.com/unit522 and use my code UNIT522 for $10 off your purchase. Links can also be found in the description.
Join me. You may be able to help solve a mystery.
I had always been told that it was never a good idea to go to the local park at night. I've heard many stories about that place, ranging from homeless people getting into loud altercations to bystanders being assaulted and even robbed. I have to admit that I didn't take these stories seriously and would often go to the park after dark. Normally I would walk through the park after finishing my lifeguard shift at the community pool. It was a part of my routine, and it always seemed like I was the only one there. Whenever I would make my way through the park, I always noticed the unmistakable smell of marijuana, even though no one was in sight. It was a bit odd, but I brushed it off, not really giving it much thought. On the night in question, I was casually strolling through the park and was approaching the area where I would usually smell the cannabis, and I saw a tall silhouette trailing behind me. I couldn't tell if the figure was a man or a woman because of the distance, but I was creeped out nonetheless. I then saw that the assailant was wearing a V for Vendetta mask, a short skirt, and was brandishing a knife. At this point, my heart was pounding. I then heard the masked figure let out an agonizing scream. The scream didn't sound like it was a female. It sounded like a deranged man. Regardless of what this person identified as, they were wearing a mask and holding a knife and screaming like a fucking psychopath, and I assumed the worst. I bolted, running faster than I ever had in my life. The figure gave chase, picking up their pace once I started running. Once I got to the front door of my house, I nervously fiddled through my pockets, trying to look for my keys. I was in too much panic that I realized that I left my keys in my backpack. I eventually gave up trying to find the keys and started pounding on the door loudly. My dad got angry when he heard the racket, but he understood my sense of urgency once I explained things to him. I can unequivocally say that the 30 seconds I spent waiting by my front door was the longest 30 seconds of my life. I should have listened to the warnings about walking through that park at night. A lesson lived is a lesson learned. This happened back in October of 2016, at the height of the killer clown craze that was going on back then. At the time, I thought nothing of it. It was just a bunch of teenagers looking for a quick laugh by frightening others. I lived alone in a 2-story house. There's about a 3-mile walk between the neighboring houses. It's all separated by tall grass and forest. This detail will be important later on. Halloween night came around, and I was watching Friday the 13th in the living room. The front of the house has a large window overlooking the lawn. It was about 10:55 when Mrs. Voorhees was getting her head chopped off, in the film, and that's when I heard a small but noticeable knock at the window. It made me jump a bit. What the hell? I went over to the window and pulled the curtains back, but all I could see outside was darkness. 10 minutes later, I'm getting ready for bed when I hear a knock at the front door. Now the front door has these long panels of blurred glass. I looked through and saw nothing but darkness. However, a red object appeared in the corner. Wondering what it could be, I changed my angle of view. And I kid you not, there was a fucking clown standing adjacent to my front door, staring right back at me. I jumped back in surprise as the clown fully pressed his face up to the glass. I saw that the clown had a knife in his hand. I grabbed my cell phone to dial 911, and that's when he started pounding on the glass. Hard enough to eventually break it. I ran up the stairs, locked my bedroom door, and got ready to call the police when an incoming call came in from my closest neighbor. Now the phone service in my area is pretty bad. The 2 bedrooms and the bathroom in my house are the only places that you can get good service. I answered the phone, but I couldn't make out anything that my neighbor was saying. His voice was coming in patchy and glitchy. He apparently was in a bad spot for phone service. He said something along the lines that someone just broke into his house. The call then disconnected. I quickly dialed 911 and told him what was going on. As I was on the phone, I heard the shattering of glass from downstairs. The dispatch informed me to stay locked in the room until the police came. I then heard footsteps coming up my stairs, shortly followed by pounding on my bedroom door. That went on for what felt like hours until I heard police sirens outside. The clown then shouted in a creepy, strained voice,
"Oh, you fucker. You just wait."
A flurry of footsteps descended the stairs and out the back door. I came out of the room and met with the officers. I explained everything to them, and how I had received an odd phone call from my neighbor. As I was talking to the officers, my neighbor actually came over. What he told us shocked me. He said that when he called me before, he was trying to warn me that a clown had broken into his house and ran off in the direction of my house. The good news is that the cops ended up catching the clown during their search of the backyard. They brought him around front and placed him into one of the cruisers. They said that they found 2 kitchen knives and a loaded Glock 17 on him. The scariest thing about this encounter is how the clown got to my house so quickly without a vehicle. He left my neighbors at 11:03 and got to my house at 11:05. The next day I got a bunch of texts from an unknown number saying that I was going to die. Since the perpetrator was locked up at this time, I'm guessing that it was an acquaintance of his, which makes me wonder if he acted alone that night. Nothing has happened since, but one thing is for sure. I fucking hate clowns. This happened back in 2012 when I was still attending college. Me and a few friends of mine opted to band together and rent out a 1-bedroom apartment near the campus. We were a bunch of party animals back then, and we wanted our own place, so we could indulge in that lifestyle without worrying about our parents or the school's administration. The apartment complex was located in a rather unsavory part of town. The cops were called out there at least once a week to break up fights or to respond to reports of break-ins. All we ever did there was shower and sleep. Having to overhear domestic disputes and arguing through the walls was just part of the deal. One night my roommates went to a party while I stayed behind to study for an upcoming exam. Aside from some Tupac playing somewhere in the upper levels, things were pretty quiet. It was around 11 p.m. when I heard a strange sound coming from the hallway outside the front door. It sounded like a large metal object being dragged across the concrete floor. There was also a muffled noise, like someone was saying something, although I couldn't quite make out any words. This went on for about 10 minutes, before there came a loud smashing sound. It was at this point that I got up and made my way over to the peephole. At first I didn't see anything, so I just waited to see if anyone would pass by my door. About a minute later, a figure came into view and stood between my door and the door opposite. It was a Caucasian male. Now I will list 3 things that instantly made every alarm bell in my head go off. The man wasn't wearing a shirt and was completely drenched in sweat. There was a large axe in the man's right hand that he was dragging behind him. And last but not least, this deranged individual had on a black leather gas mask that completely hid his face. I was awestruck. This is the kind of thing that you see in low-budget horror movies. This kind of shit doesn't happen in real life. It was a complete shock to the system. As if reading my mind, a creepy, muffled voice then began singing.
Come with me, Hail Mary, run quick, see. What do we have here now? Do you wanna ride or die? La da da da, la 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 la.
As soon as the man finished the verse, he lifted his left leg and heaved the axe into my door. The movement was so fast, it caused me to topple backward. As soon as I scrambled to my feet, I heard another voice from further down the hallway.
Hey, what the fuck are you doing?
I rushed back to the peephole. The masked man was now gone. To the left of my front door was a fire escape, where he was able to make a quick getaway. I then saw the apartment's security guard step into view with his taser drawn. "Hey, do you want me to call the police?" I shouted through the door.
Yeah, if you don't mind. I'm going back outside to cut him off.
I immediately called the police and explained the situation to them. Unfortunately, the masked man managed to evade both the security guard and the police. The complex was surrounded by a small forest, and there was just too many ways for him to escape. After the lease was up, I moved out of that hellhole. A lunatic pacing up and down the hallway outside my door, wearing a gas mask and dragging an axe behind him while singing a creepy-ass rendition of a Tupac song, was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was a terrifying experience, but I can look back on it now and laugh. I hope you've enjoyed my story. And stay safe out there, guys.
There's always a reason to be afraid.
Back in the mid-'80s, we were traveling through Tennessee on the way to visit friends in Texas. Mom was driving, and I, a teenager at the time, was navigating by using a paper map, as these were the days before cell phones and GPS. We made it past Nashville on I-40 pretty late at night. We were maybe an hour outside the city. I was charting our progress old school with pencil and paper. We pass an exit, I mark it. A minute later, a summer thunderstorm hit. Visibility dropped to nothing, all traffic slows to a crawl, and we decide to pull off at the next possible exit and find a motel to spend the night, because there's no way that we're making significant progress in this storm. Slow, white-knuckle driving ensues. An exit looms up on the right, no signage that we can see in the downpour, and we take it. At the top of the exit ramp, we turn right toward a brilliantly lit-up gas station. It was a left turn onto an overpass crossing I-40 with no lights from that side of the interstate. We were on a dinky little road at that point. To our right, there was a gas station which we're rapidly passing. To our left and back behind some trees was what appeared to be a motel, but you couldn't make out the sign well in the rain. We drove past the gas station before we really realized that the road just ended ahead. The gas station was the only building on this side of the road. It went from a 1.5 lane that was paved to a 1-lane gravel road, we could see a short way ahead, to tire track dirt and grass, all over the space of maybe 20 yards. Now, we were past this gas station, and there was only one turnoff from this road. It was on our left. We took it and tried to back up and turn around to get back to the gas station. Unfortunately, the paved slope of that narrow, driveway-sized turnoff led steeply down into a huge mud pit. No backing up out of it. My mom put the car into low gear, turned hard, and headed back for the gravel road through the mud. We almost made it, but got mired out. The front passenger tire caught on the corner of an exposed concrete storm drain, maybe 3 feet from the road. Out of the car, into the rain and mud. We walked to the gas station. The place was spotless, super bright, and had 2 young men behind the counter. What sounded like one of Elvis's songs was playing on their radio inside. Attendants' first words on seeing us walk in were, "Did you get stuck in the mud?" They said it as a super enthusiastic, way too happy greeting. Like Disney staffer welcoming you as you walk into the park for the first time levels of happy. Also, these night shift clerks were dressed in suits that looked about 30 years out of date. The place was kinda creepy. We admitted that we had, indeed, gotten stuck. We asked if there was a towing company that we could call. They pulled out a phone book. Again, this was before cell phones or the internet, and started talking to each other. It was not a Nashville phone book, some little township. Population couldn't have been more than 100 from the handful of white pages, but the book had dozens of yellow pages of nothing but tow truck companies. Like literally hundreds of tow truck companies for this town too small to appear on the map. The attendants had a friendly debate about whose turn it was to get a car out of the mud. They decided to skip over the company who was theoretically next because there had been some sort of problem with them the last time that they were called out for a tow. They made a decision on who to call and let my mom use their phone. More weirdness, and the creepiness intensifies. It was still storming, though less at that point. The truck arrives maybe 5 minutes later, brilliant white, not a speck of dirt or a drop of mud on it. I've seen vehicles in a new car lot that were dirtier. The 2 young men in the truck are also dressed like they had just stepped out of the 1950s. They were wearing freshly polished patent leather shoes without a drop of mud on them, along with starched white shirts, paper hats, and bow ties. We hike across the street next door to the mud pit where our car is stuck. The tow truck guys are horrified. "They almost got out of the mud?" they say to each other repeatedly. The subtext from their shocked tone is clear. No one must ever, ever escape the mud pit on their own. These people will have to take some sort of action to make sure that no one else gets as close as we did to escaping. They tow the car out. Easy peasy. We all go back to the gas station. We pay the tow truck drivers for services. The drivers let the gas station attendants know that my mom and I almost made it out of the mud on our own. The attendants, again, are horrified and shocked by this. By now we're getting huge, uncanny valley vibes from all four of these men, and not just them, the whole place is too clean, too brightly lit, and too weirdly out of date. It was a surprisingly good facsimile of a small town rest stop populated by real humans. Almost perfect, in fact. We are definitely in Creepy Town. If these guys were humans, there was seriously something off about them. If they weren't, they almost had their ordinary human act down pat. The truck drivers leave. The attendants turn, all super friendly again, and ask Mom and me if we're going to stay the night in the hotel across the road. They're so excited that we might spend the night here. They talk about how great it is. Mom and I make non-committal noises and return to the car. I tell Mom we're not staying here tonight. She agrees wholeheartedly. The rain is finally letting up. We drive down I-40 to the very next exit. It was maybe 5 miles. We pull off and spend the night in a kind of crappy but ordinary motel. At least it's not the Bates Motel, we joke. The rest of the trip goes well. Then, several days later on the way home, Mom and I decide that we would really like to see the creepy town in the light of day. It couldn't have been that weird, could it? Heading back up I-40, we pass the exit where we actually did spend the night on the way down. We can see the hotel, the exit number matches the notes that I had made on the map, everything. Then we start looking for the next exit. The exit to Creepy Town. Should be about 5 miles along with an overpass. 5 miles pass. No exit. No overpass. 5 more miles later before we find the next exit off of I-40. It's the one that I had marked as being right before the storm first hit. In short, Creepy Town does not exist. I have traveled I-40 many times since, often remarking that, hey, there's that exit where the weird storm hit and we went to Creepy Town, and there's the exit that we actually did spend the night at. We never found the Creepy Town exit between those 2 points, ever again. A couple of years ago, me and my pops decided to go on a road trip. It was very out of the blue. I wasn't even expecting it, but I decided to go anyways. It would be some solid father-son bonding time. After driving for what seemed like a couple of hours, was around maybe 8 to 9 p.m., we pulled into this gas station for snacks, water, and to use the bathroom, and we went back inside of our car. Keep in mind, this gas station was basically in the middle of nowhere. Anyways, we got back into our car and decided to look for a motel, but there was none. And I mean not a single one anywhere near us. My dad was really tired, so we just decided to go to sleep in the vehicle. We pulled up into this sort of resting area / parking lot and decided to pass out for the night. My dad fell fast asleep, but I was on my phone for a couple more hours, and around 11 p.m. I just felt suffocated by the tense air and decided to step out for a bit. I felt safe because the gas station was still in sight, and there would be a couple of trucks that would occasionally drive by, so I was at ease. At the time, I was also texting my friend who lives in Seattle, Washington. We were on the phone for a little while. Then I saw what looked like a large cornfield, and I had never actually seen a cornfield in real life, so I decided to cross the road and just get a closer look. That's exactly what I did. I got extremely close, and I started feeling like I was being watched, but again I just thought, well, you're literally outside in the dark, standing next to a tall cornfield, of course you're going to feel this way. So I just brushed it off. I even considered going in, but I thought, why would I even do that? So anyways, I just decided to take a step back when I noticed a barn. It was a large, white barn with red, maybe black stripes. It was hard to tell in the dark, but it was definitely a barn. I was stupid and young when this happened, maybe 14 or 15. Out of curiosity, I decided to go check it out, and the barn was next to the cornfield, sort of tucked in a little. I literally thought, haha, I wish I could see something that would freak me out, as a joke, because I never really thought that anything would happen, and I love being scared. Anyways, I started making my way toward the barn. As I was getting closer and closer, I remembered very vividly that I was wearing no socks, just slip-on slides. I remember the dirt rubbing against my toes as I stepped. I remember sending pictures to my friend in Washington. I jokingly was saying that I saw something and that I was going to check it out. As I got closer, I saw something. It was behind the barn, but sort of off to the side, like how when someone peers around a corner. I thought it was a bell. Literally, I assumed that it was a bell attached to the corner of the barn, so I just walked a little closer. Even as I'm writing this, I am getting goosebumps. I walked closer and saw the head of someone or something just peering around the corner at me. At that moment, I just straight up froze. My fight or flight was out of function, because there I was literally seeing someone or something peering at me. After about 5 to 10 seconds, the noise that Snapchat makes when you get a notification snapped me out of it, and I just ran as fast as I could across the road to my dad's car and got in. I felt a sense of relief wash over my body. Somehow my dad was not awake. Me gasping for air wasn't enough to wake him from his deep sleep. I really considered waking him up and telling him what I saw and that we had to leave, but he would just assume that I was joking or having an episode. Which sounds dumb, but he's assumed that before, since he never has believed in anything paranormal or anything out of the ordinary related. I took deep breaths and just texted my friend telling her what I saw, and even she didn't believe me. I don't blame her. And I wouldn't blame any of you either. Sometimes I have a hard time actually believing what I saw. But I know that it was real. I was sober and fully aware. But from the bottom of my heart, the part that disturbs me the most is that whatever was peering at me from around that corner was very tall. At least 7, maybe 8 feet tall, and every time I think about this, I get a sense of dread and paranoia. I haven't told any of my family or my dad, but if any of you have a clue as to what I might have seen, please let me know. Again, I wasn't hallucinating. This was before I even figured out anything about psychedelics or drugs in general. Please let me know if you have any ideas or info. Also, it probably sounds fake because if someone came to me telling me what I'm saying, I would also just rule it out to be fake. But please, I've been trying to piece it together for the last couple of months. I was sort of 50-50 on paranormal encounters, but after that experience, I believe. I believe in walkers to wendigos. I believe in ghosts to La Llorona. It has changed me, knowing what's out there. And everyone wants to believe, oh yeah, ghosts aren't real. But I feel like they are deep down. We know that there is some messed up stuff out there in this world. And I happened to encounter something. Ten years ago, I was a stupid 18-year-old kid who was living with his parents in Flagstaff, Arizona. We moved almost every 3 years due to the nature of my dad's work, so I got to see most of the country. It was a Tuesday in November. My mom said that we were packing up the apartment and moving to Seattle for what was going to be another year and 2 months. I had a small 300cc motorcycle at the time. I think it was a V-Star, but I could be wrong. And decided to hook up a GPS and use the time to go on a ride across the West Coast. My mother didn't like the idea, but I knew that I would be safe due to personal experience and knowing when and when not to ride. Besides, it would be a 3-day trip and I would get to see all sorts of neat stuff along the way. I notified my job that I was going to transfer, threw on my saddlebags, and a day later was on the road. I made it all the way through western Nevada in order to avoid LA traffic, and stopped prior to taking the I-5 into California. That evening I stayed in a Days Inn hotel. After breakfast and a talk with the locals, I crossed through Reno into western Cali. From there, it was only 4 more hours until I reached Oregon. Luckily, I had time to spare, so I wanted to take some back roads and discover what this dank, damp state had to offer. It was fall, and there was a deep chill in the air. Riding through it sent shivers down my spine like nothing else. November's weather in Oregon is almost identical to that of Pittsburgh during that season. It makes you want to curl up into a ball and sleep for a decade, only to wake up and repeat the process all over again. Eventually, I got tired enough that I wanted to find somewhere to stay, and managed to see a sign advertising a Green Hills hunting lodge on the side of the road. It was accompanied by a long, steep hill that took me what felt like an hour to climb. Then, when I reached the top, I was greeted by a large and gorgeous cabin that looked like it was specifically made for weddings, like something ripped out of a fairy tale. Bewildered, I parked my bike, took off my bags, and threw a tarp over it, which was secured to bungee cords. I walked inside and met a Korean woman who was working the front desk. She spoke perfect English, but had a very distinct accent in which she explained to me that I could choose my room due to an abundance of vacancy. Cool, right? I chose room 31, as the entire building was all on one floor that evening. She handed me a key with the tag 31 attached via a keyring and tells me to have a good night. I throw all my stuff down and head to the bathroom to wash up after riding for an entire day. The room itself looks like a cabin and is absolutely gorgeous. The floorboards were all real wood, and even the shower had the same natural wood as the tub surrounding it. I take a shower and then head to bed, and realize that the mattress is incredibly comfortable and make myself cozy, only to realize that something is off. It's not something obvious, but I knew that there was some sort of oddity about this place. I push it to the back of my mind and fall asleep. The next morning, I wake up to find that the walls went from a natural brown to a deeper gray, as if they were stained overnight. This wasn't a result of natural lighting versus LED. The room was without a doubt a different color. I shrug it off and get all my stuff together, making sure that everything is still where I left it. I head out of the room to find that not only had the walls changed color, I was on a second floor that previously didn't exist. The light from the morning sun wasn't permeating the windows of the cabin, and there was no one in sight. I started to freak out, nearly having a panic attack because this wasn't right. Thankfully, there were stairs that I dashed down as fast as I could and made my way to the front desk and rang the bell once, twice, 3 times. I was breathing heavy and knew that I had to get out of there. No one was coming to check up on me after about 10 minutes of waiting, so I dashed out of the doors and into the lot. I ripped the tarp off of my bike and looked back at the lodge. It wasn't the same. This was a broken down, abandoned, dirty building that looked as though it was about to be condemned. I didn't want to ask any more questions, and rode off as fast as I could. That place still haunts me, even to this day. For a little backstory, my partner and I have been dating for about 1.5 years. This February, I was given tickets as a birthday gift to finally visit him, as I'm in Scotland. Experience 1. I spent the middle of February over in Arizona visiting my partner. While we're both interested in the paranormal, I believe in it all, having had multiple experiences, whereas he tends to just humor me, not believing in it much himself. He's never mentioned anything odd happening in his apartment, but I saw, heard, and felt small things the first couple of days that I was there. One morning in particular at around 4 a.m. I was on the sofa playing on my phone, jet lag, when I looked up and saw a figure standing over him as he slept. It was similar to a shadow person phenomenon, just a dark humanoid shape, but it felt nasty. When I saw it, it turned, almost as if it was startled to see someone else in the room. Never mind, someone who could also see it. It did sort of a double take and then disappeared, but the energy in the room felt off. I performed a cleansing ritual that I've come to rely on when negative energies are bothering me. For the remainder of my trip, the apartment felt light and airy, with the exception of later that day when I was taking a nap and felt what I thought was my partner standing over me watching me sleep. I opened my eyes and felt the negative presence over me, as though trying to work out who I was and why I was there. It was then told in very clear terms that it wasn't welcome, whether I was there or not, and it cleared out. No more issues, so that was fine. Experience 2. My partner's friends, another couple, really helped in making me feel welcome, and the 4 of us went out on road trips a couple of times, once to Jerome and another to a recreational spot by a lake. I felt a little funny anytime we were driving around near or on the reservations, as though the native spirits were very much aware of us going through their land, but nothing felt bad, just sort of a curiosity. But one instance in particular sticks out. While driving toward Phoenix after a day at the lake, we were all chatting away in the car when we got into reservation territory. I got that not alone feeling again, but still, it was curious, though this time it was more intense. There was a lull in the conversation, and I was just admiring the landscape as the sun was going down, when in the middle of the center embankment on the road, there was a figure that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. I know it was male, and I know that he was a Native American. Nothing felt wrong, but when I asked if anyone else had seen him, they all said no, despite the fact that, as far as I was concerned, you couldn't miss him. He was old, tall, and completely white. His clothes, hair, everything, with an aura of hazy light around him, simply standing and watching over the road. I don't know who he was, but it felt like he was watching over the people traveling through his land. It was comforting. I'm an OTR truck driver, which means that I drive across the country multiple times in a month-long period. I'd like to share a story with you. On a dark July night around 2 a.m., I was headed south on US 93 highway in Nevada. I was approximately 30 miles north off of Las Vegas. Traffic was scarce. I had not seen a single vehicle for at least 40 minutes. The only source of light that illuminated the road were the truck headlights. I was on the phone with a friend of mine just chatting about random stuff when in the distance about 300 feet ahead of me I saw something on the shoulder of the road. At first I thought it might have been a turned over construction sign or a bag of some sort. But as I was approaching the object, I started to make out some features. It was a human-like figure, I thought. Just to be clear, that area is deserted and there's absolutely nothing to be found within a 25-mile radius. When I was about 5 yards away, I could see it clearly. It was a boy. He was around 8 to 10 years old, I'd say. He had a school backpack and a white plush bunny in his right arm held tightly against his chest. He was just standing there with his cold stare, completely unemotional, looking me directly in the eyes. He didn't break the stare as I passed him. He didn't even blink or flinch, and let me remind you that it's an 80,000-pound semi-truck moving at 65 miles an hour. My heart was racing. My whole body was covered in goosebumps. A cold chill went down my spine. I don't think that I have ever been so disturbed in my life since I've never had any paranormal encounters. Once I passed him, the first thing that came to my mind was that if I see him appear again a couple of miles ahead, I'm gonna have a heart attack. But thankfully, it never happened. The rest of the trip was uneventful. I still don't know what it was. I'm not trying to claim that it was a ghost or the spirit of a deceased child. I just can't find any adequate explanation to it. It was definitely not a hallucination since I was wide awake and talking on the phone. It just seems weird to me. What in the world was a 10-year-old kid doing by himself in the middle of a desert? A few years ago, a friend and I took a road trip across country. We stopped at an out-of-the-way place in Wyoming late at night. As soon as we rolled up, we both felt as if it were haunted, but really needed to sleep, so we checked in and put anything paranormal out of our minds. The place was very run down. We had 2 beds in our room. Mine was closest to the door and window with a nightstand in between us. Also, we each had a little lamp above our beds. I laid down, clicked off my lamp, and was facing the window. While lying down, I saw a black, shadowy figure cross the length of the wall and then vanish. About 30 seconds later, after I had laid my head down, my friend began playing with my hair. I sat upright and said, "What the?" But she was in her bed, 5 feet away, reading her book. I didn't say anything because, as mentioned, we just wanted to sleep. Later that night, my friend woke me and asked if she could sleep in my bed with me. I said yes, but didn't ask why. That morning, we had confession time. I told her that I thought that she was playing with my hair, that's why I sat up in bed before falling asleep. She said that she had looked over and saw a black, shadowy figure hovering above me at the moment when I had looked up. During the night, after she had turned her light off, someone was playing with her feet, rubbing them, massaging them, etc. She couldn't get any sleep and was freaked out, which is why she cowered over to my bed. That morning, we asked the waitress in the very creepy stuffed animal heads on the wall, dark, musty coffee shop if the place was haunted. She said she wasn't allowed to comment on that. We pressured her to tell us the history of the place. She told us that the hotel used to be POW bunkers, where the Chinese had been held or something like that, around World War II. Anyway, I've wanted to go back for a while, and I'm wondering, have any of you had similar experiences? The hotel was in Wyoming, well off the beaten path. I finally talked my friend into moving from Seattle to Texas. We decided to split the move into 2 parts. The first one last week, moving her stuff in a rented SUV. We both had some time, and we decided to take the trip on all the back roads. We stayed at a mineral springs resort in the middle of nowhere in Oregon that was amazing. On the second day, we got up to drive to Vegas. We took US 50, which is known as the loneliest highway in America. I will admit that before this, it had been 8 to 10 hours before we had had any human contact. I am a former over-the-road trucker and a US veteran, so I'm used to traveling to different places and being in new surroundings every day, but it also taught me to listen to my instincts. Let me tell you, did they come in loud and clear while on this trip a few hours away from Vegas we stopped to get gas. As we rolled into the place, I just thought it looked aged, very dated. My friend decided to get gas. I walked inside to look at the place and get some snacks. I can honestly say that I can't point to any one thing that was wrong, but the feeling that overcame me was indescribable. It basically told me that the place was, well, the phrase that I would use is out of place, and that I needed to go right then. Now, I'll admit that this could be my own experience, and maybe because I had such a bad feeling that I was imagining things, but the minute I decided to leave, without buying anything or even using the restroom, I swear everybody in the place started looking at me. And I don't mean just the employees, but the patrons. I walked quickly to my car, and told my friend that if she believed in instincts, that we should just get in the car and leave right that second. We did, and we did not breathe easy until we were about 10 miles away. That was my spooky encounter in the middle of Death Valley. I traveled quite a bit when I was younger, specifically in the Pacific Northwest of the US, as that's where I'm from. Whenever my single mother, older sister, and I took a break at the various rest stops along the way, I was almost always met by an older woman, likely in her 50s, early 60s. She offered my sister and I a variety of treats, generally hot cocoa and cookies, or lemonade depending on the weather. We always took it graciously. I think my mom assumed that we always bought the things with our allowance at the little shop that's sometimes integrated into the rest stop buildings. But I always remember that woman being at a white plastic table with black legs and never charging us any money. She never spoke. She was the highlight of many trips. I always felt safe and attribute her presence with my love for road trips and rest stops in general. Well, I brought her up a few years back in conversation with my mom and sister, and while my sister seemed to remember her, my mom did not, and pointed out how ridiculous that would be. I honestly hadn't thought much of it since I was 8 or 9, and just took her to be part of the travel experience. But our trips spanned everywhere between Idaho and California, and I know that I saw her at least once every trip from ages 5 to 8. As the chances of us coincidentally meeting so often without my mom noticing are very slim, I can only assume that there was something going on. I know that this could be a muddled memory and have generally ruled it out as one, but I have had many ghost experiences as a child that I hesitate to abandon entirely. Does anyone else have any similar experiences that might be related? If this kind woman is still helping wandering children keep their bellies warm, I would love to leave her a thank you on my next voyage. When I was a kid, I was with my family on a road trip a few hours away. We were driving down through a winding canyon, and it was dark. I was looking out my window, just staring at the dirt walls that we were passing. It was like the inside of cliffs on one side and forest on the other. Well, I was on the side of the car with the dirt hills and the cliff walls, and as we turned to go around a bend, I saw something human-shaped, which looked like it had a long, white face that resembled the Scream mask, hanging on the hillside. It happened so fast that it scared me to death nearly. I never said anything. I think it was because I wasn't sure what I had